don't say. Born to play. Every day don't say. Hello.
Good evening. I'm Lou Goldstein, and welcome to another edition of Focus On. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the financial markets, and I'm pleased and very proud to have as my guest tonight Liam Griff, who's a partner of Shorebridge Capital, and he's currently serves as their managing director since, I guess, 2015. But Liam, thank you very much for coming on. I know you're a busy guy.
Thanks for having me.
And the financial world is a little topsy-turvy these days. A lot of questions, and hopefully we'll be able to, give some information about what's going on. So stay tuned. Should be a great discussion. So a little bit more about Liam, though. In addition to co-leading the private funds access vehicles business, he leads Shorebridge Merchant Partners, the firm's private equity strategy. He also has oversight of the firm's financial and operational functions. Prior to his role at Shorebridge, Liam founded Griff Capital Partners, LLC, through which he manages a venture capital fund. He launched the fund following his experience at Gleacher & Company, where he managed proprietary investments of the firm. And he also began his career at Lehman Brothers in the fixed income syndicate group. And upon the firm's filing from bankruptcy in 2008, he joined Barclays Capital, where he traded front-end credit and rates products. He graduated with his bachelor's in government from Harvard College, with a secondary concentration in economics and a citation in French. And he also spends his time now in Madison, New Jersey, and also in Montauk, New York, with his wife Kelly and their 3 children, Jack, Harry, and Maggie, who was recently born. And congratulations to all on that. Yes, new addition to the Griff family. So a lot's going on in the financial markets these days. A lot of people wondering, is there a bubble there? What's going on? And we'll get to that with basically interest rates low and the cost of living being high, and the question is, how do the two equate? But before we get into that, maybe we could talk a little bit about some of the things that interest people. And one of the things that is most interesting is basically how you got started in the business, because everybody wants to know, how do you get started in a business like this?
Happy to. Again, thanks for having me here. So I got started in the business right after college. Actually, towards the end of college, I did an internship at Lehman Brothers. So that was the summer going into my senior year of college. And there was an on-campus recruiting process that at the end of that, I ultimately was given a job at Lehman, and I worked there for the summer. A lot of the big banks all have like sort of a junior year summer internship program, and for the most part, this is the way it used to be anyway. I guess it could have changed a little bit since then, and COVID definitely changed things for the big banks and their recruiting. They would just hire most of their full-time post-college hires directly from that internship program. So that's kind of the path that I took, and it worked out for me.
It's great. Now, you mentioned that you were at Lehman Brothers in 2008, which was a little bit of a crazy time in the financial world, and especially with Lehman going bankruptcy. What was that like?
Yeah, I didn't, at the time, I'm sure I didn't totally grasp the enormity of what was happening. I thought it was, I didn't actually think this, but there was an element of, this is just, what happens at your job. Crazy stuff happens, and I'd only been there 2 weeks. Only been on the desk anyway for 2 weeks before we filed for bankruptcy, and I was just like, oh. This is, maybe one of the things that go on in the working world. But it was crazy, largest bankruptcy of all time. Lehman was owned. I think it was the most significantly employee-owned firm of all the big banks. So there were a lot of people who sat right next to me who had a lot of their personal net worth tied up in Lehman stock that went to zero. So it was shocking from a lot of perspectives, on a personal basis, on a firm basis, on a professional basis. But I was lucky. We got picked up by Barclays. I think basically everybody at the firm was hired initially anyway, and I had a nice run there for the next few years.
So after Barclays, how'd you end up at Shorebridge?
Yeah, I took sort of an indirect route in my career. I did a brief stint in investment banking at Gleacher immediately after Barclays, because I wanted to sort of get away from the day-to-day grind of trading, and that role, that investment banking role, ended up turning into more of a using the firm's cash to seed companies. So it turned into more of an investment role. And it was a short role, but I learned a lot during that time. Gleacher actually also went under, so at that point I was 2 for 3. But using my learnings from the period at Gleacher, I decided I wanted to be a venture capitalist. I wanted to raise a venture capital fund and invest in companies. So I set out to do that, and I raised a small amount of capital, made some investments, and was sort of at a crossroads where I needed to decide, should I try to raise more capital, a second fund, or do I need another job? And I met with the founder of my firm, Doug Blagden, my current firm, and he convinced me to join him and help to build out Shorebridge, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
So what do you think is your biggest challenge every day at Shorebridge?
How to make money.
Yeah.
That's kind of number one role, responsibility, goal is to figure out how to make money.
Right.
We obviously want to do that within our value system. We want to do that in interesting ways, ways that support our clients, ways that are sort of exciting and different and allow us to really add value,
Yeah.
from our specific skill set. But that's kind of the challenge, is figure out how to make money every day. And we've come up with a few good ways to make money over the years, and I like to think we'll come up with a few more ways in the future.
That's great. So thinking about things, you talked about thinking about ways to make money. What do you spend your time thinking about, especially where do you see the opportunity in the financial markets today?
Well, I spend most of my time, maybe I'll take it as a two-part question, because I'm not sure where I spend most of my time will apply to everybody, but where I spend most of my time is in the lower middle market of private equity. So these are smaller companies, companies that call it $10 to $100 million-ish of sales, right? And a lot of these companies, again, they're private, so you couldn't go out and buy their stock. They're family owned, or they're owned by the entrepreneur who started the company, call it 30 years ago. So there's a significant generational shift going on here, where there's baby boomers who started companies 30, 40 years ago, whose kids don't want to take them over, so they need to sell the company. And we, along with our clients, those are our investor clients and financial sponsor clients, we help to find those businesses, arrange the capital necessary to buy those businesses, and then sort of do a professionalization of the business in order to, it's never really been owned by institutional capital or by somebody who runs businesses for a living. So the goal is to then professionalize, institutionalize, improve the business in some way, grow it further, and then sell it in a few years, and make all of our investors money in the process.
Okay. And
I guess on the second part, the second part, where do I see opportunity, kind of beyond that?
Yeah.
My view on the markets is, and this is not investment advice, I need to be sure to say that. I work at regulated entities. This is not investment advice, and it's not the views of my firm. But I'm a firm believer in passive investing, that if you put money in the S&P, over time, it has proven that it just kind of goes up. So if you can take a long-term view, and you can be really patient and diligent in not selling, over time, if you invest in the S&P, you'll probably have more money in the future.
You have to be patient.
Have to be patient. Have to be patient.
You have to have some patience. A
For
lot of
sure.
times people are buying, they're selling, they're trying to get it when
Timing
it's
the
down.
market is a very difficult thing
Yeah.
to do. A lot of people have lost a lot of money that way.
Yeah, yeah. You talked a little bit about, maybe we want to talk a little bit about, there's certain things like cryptocurrency, that have come into play, outside maybe your own book. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that and talk a little bit more about passive investing and what does it look like for cryptocurrency? Because a lot of people hear about, investing in certain things. They can't tangibly feel it, they can't see it. And they're wondering, is it a gimmick? Is it actually something that's going to be here in the future? What's the probability of something like that?
Yeah, those are all very legitimate concerns, I think, when talking about cryptocurrencies. I'm of the view that Bitcoin in particular has cemented enough of its place as an alternative to digital, an alternative to gold, a digital gold,
Right.
if you will.
The standard.
A standard.
Yeah.
So, I think I'm personally invested in Bitcoin. I'm of the view that investing in Bitcoin, that some percentage of your portfolio probably should be invested in Bitcoin. Again, not investment advice, but that's my view anyway. Because I think it is despite its volatility, does seem to be a store of value. It does seem to have garnered the attention of a lot of market participants, institutional investors, et cetera. So I think Bitcoin is probably here to stay for a little while.
Right.
The way that I think about some of these other ones, and I would put Ethereum right up there with Bitcoin. Ethereum is a slightly different case because it does seem to have a lot more use cases, the
Right.
Ethereum blockchain, than Bitcoin does. Some of these other ones, I think I kind of make the analogy that where we are in the cryptocurrency ecosystem, et cetera, right now is akin to, call it the late 90s and the internet era, where there's just all sorts of, running fast and breaking things. There's all sorts of innovation that's going on. Some of it good, some of it probably not so good. But there is real opportunity to, if you do your work, if you, spend a lot of time thinking about this, talking to people, learning that there are opportunities within this space for sure.
Now you also, NFTs have come into play. And maybe you can explain a little bit to everybody what NFTs are, their importance, and maybe a little bit where you stand too.
Sure. So NFT stands for non-fungible token. It's non-fungible in that it can be proven based on a transaction that occurs on typically the Ethereum blockchain. It can occur on other blockchains, but typically the Ethereum blockchain that shows that you own this thing, this digital asset.
Right.
The current use cases are mostly around digital art, and it seems that there is some amount of speculative craze over, hey, I own this picture of a gorilla, and for whatever reason, the market is now valuing this picture of a gorilla at some unbelievable number.
Right.
So that I haven't personally bought any of those sorts of NFTs. I get that the market is valuing it a certain way, and you can make money that way. But where I see the kind of excitement around NFTs is in the future use cases, the future applications around smart contracts in the financial markets, in the music space, in the healthcare space. There's ways where an NFT shows that you own something. It proves that you own something. And I think that's going to be valuable down the line a little bit. The last one I'll talk about is kind of the metaverse. I know that term maybe gets thrown out a lot, and it's in the news recently because of Facebook's changing their name.
Changing the name, yeah.
But NFTs, I think, will be very valuable as the metaverse proliferates further. What I mean there is that to prove that you own something in this virtual world, an NFT is an easy way to do that.
Right.
You'll be able to, just taking the art example, you'll be able to display the art that you own in the digital world, in the metaverse, and NFTs are what makes that all possible.
Okay. Now I know there's a lot of news that we can read every day about financial aspects and what's happening in the world. and I know there's a lot of social media, both the pros and the amateurs, especially the amateurs on social media. But what types of sources do you lean to or refer to stay current with what's going on in the financial world?
Sure, I'm a big believer, or a big user anyway, of daily email news digests, and I subscribe to a bunch of them. They usually have some amount of going deep on a couple of topics, but also listing the other high-level salient points from a whole bunch of other topics. I read Morning Brew, which is a great one. Axios puts out a daily newsletter, which I like to read. Term Sheet. Matt Levine, who's a former banker turned journalist, financial journalist. I think those are a few of the ones that I read pretty religiously, actually.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Fed now. There's a lot of news about the Fed coming out. A lot of news about potential bubbles in the market right now. Interest rates are low. The cost of living is around 5%. People don't understand how to equate those two with such a big bubble and gap in the middle.
Yep.
And a lot of whispering that maybe it's a little soft out there and there may be a correction coming up. So do you think the Fed's tapering of bond purchases will cause stocks to correct down the road?
I don't think that the Fed's tapering is going to have that impact because it's been so well televised, or at least sort of well reported in advance. From now until June of next year, I believe it's June of next year, the Fed is going to reduce the amount of bonds that they're buying in the open market. I think they've been very forthcoming and about their plans to do so, and now it's a function of just making it happen. I think a lot of that has been priced into markets. I think the Fed, compared to the Bank of England, which just had a major surprise last week by not raising rates when they said they were going to, I think the Fed does a much better job of sticking to doing what it says it was going to do.
Right.
So I think the bigger issue is what's going on with inflation. When will, assuming it's after the bond purchases have ceased, what will an increase in the Fed funds rate do to the market? I think that's the bigger issue.
Right.
When that happens and what's going on at the time, especially with inflation, with labor markets, with sort of the general feeling, sentiment of the population. I think that's going to be the bigger issue. But between now and then, I don't see anything major on the horizon that could potentially cause a large correction. Corrections are always possible. We saw with COVID, a year and a half ago, that they can come from basically nowhere.
Right.
But as of right now, it's hard for me to see, what's going to cause the next one and when that's going to be.
Okay, because I know a lot of people, they're concerned about inflation. They look and they see that food prices have gone up, gas prices have gone up, and they're wondering whether or not this is something that's going to be long-term, whether it's sustainable, both to the economy as well as to the markets, and whether or not the recently passed infrastructure bill, Biden's infrastructure bill that recently passed, what they call the Build Back Better bill, Trump.
Triple B.
Yeah. So, what does Triple B? Does Triple B have any effect on the markets or inflation? Or I know it just passed, so not everyone's had a chance to review it. But I was wondering if you had any thoughts on it.
Well, the thing that I read most recently is that we will begin to feel the effects of the bill within the next, as soon as 2 to 3 months from now.
Okay.
That the dollars are going to be put to use, the beginnings of jobs are going to be created. What effect that has on the stock market, I think I think the stock market's really good at pricing stuff in, and
Right.
I think that this, a lot of this anyway, or maybe the easy to decipher stuff, has already been priced in. inflation's a real issue, though. I think that the inflation outlook, everybody's blaming it on the supply chain and blaming it on labor shortages, and those things are all a result of COVID. And there's real uncertainty there.
Right.
Is it transitory? Is it long-lasting? I'm of the view that a whole bunch of people, I think it's 3 million people, left the labor force over the course of the last 18 months.
Especially 1 million truck drivers too.
Yeah, and that's causing a real problem.
Yeah.
That's got to be solved. That has to be solved in some way. Shifting supply chains, shifting labor. I don't know how that's going to happen.
Right.
But it's so important to the normal functioning of our economy that it's got to be solved. And I think that once it is solved, inflation will come back down to earth. If it's not solved by this time next year, though, you can be damn sure that the Fed's going to be doing something about it.
Right. Now, the stock market overall is running, the Dow is running around 35,000 or something like that. But yet the economy still seems to be lagging behind. And I'm wondering, a lot of people think there's a disconnect between when we talk about the economy and when we talk about what the stock market is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And how can you explain that to somebody who's trying to really get a good grasp of what that means?
Yeah, if I were able to explain that, then I would probably be president of the United States. I think that comes down to more of a
chair of the Fed.
Chair of the Fed. More of a political issue than financial, and I think it's largely around wealth disparities in this country and sort of the spoils accruing only to the top and not to the rest of society. I think that's structural more than anything.
Right.
It's a difficult problem to solve, one that's well above my pay grade.
Okay. Well, talking about things that have influenced you in the past, one of the things I like to ask all the guests who come on the show is I like to ask them about someone who served as a role model for them, coming up. And I was wondering if there's any individuals that have served as a role model for you, over the years.
Sure, and I probably should have mentioned this when you asked about how did I get into the business, but my dad is definitely a role model. So my dad worked in financial services. He was a bond trader. I sort of liked the way that he thought about the world. I liked his work ethic. I liked elements of his life that I saw as a kid growing up, and I said, that's all pretty cool. Maybe I should do that. And that was kind of the original inspiration for going into financial services. And he continues to teach me a lot. He's still in the industry. We still talk all the time about his job, my job, markets, etc. And he's for sure my role model.
That's good. So for anybody that's thinking of getting into the financial markets, what advice would you give them?
Buckle up would be the first. Read. Have a handle on two things: the broader landscape of financial markets as a whole and how all the pieces fit together,
right.
And then specifically where within that broader landscape you think you might be interested and able to add value. So the reading is going to lead to the understanding of those two things. And then from there, it's about figuring out that way to get your foot in the door. And then once you have your foot in the door, you can kind of navigate from there. That'd be kind of my advice. I also tell people, when I'm meeting with younger folks and they're asking, hey, what should I do career-wise? I do say to always, if you want to be in this industry or even industries that are tangentially related to this industry, go be an investment banker for a couple of years, because the skill set that you learn is really transferable to kind of all the other roles within financial services, and it's an invaluable experience.
So if someone wanted to get in touch with you or to reach out to you, how could they reach you?
Best is by email.
Okay.
That's Griff, Gri, 2 F's as in Frank, at shorebridge.com. Shore like the Jersey Shore,
Okay.
bridge like a bridge.
Okay. Griff at shorebridge.com.
That's right.
There we go. So I know Liam's much too modest to discuss this, but for those who are under 40, Liam's one of the top, 100 people to watch out for in the future, and to be a good person to seek advice from. So if you're looking to get some advice, not necessarily, amateur advice, I would say go with someone who's been recognized in his field as excelling in what he does. So, reach out to Liam, and I'm sure he will give you, an honest appraisal of whatever situation you want. But in the time that we have left, is there anything else that we should know about the financial markets today that we haven't already touched on? Any predictions for the future? Although no one knows the future.
Yeah, nobody knows the future. I think the theme that maybe I'd want to leave you with is that this cryptocurrency stuff is happening, and I'd encourage people to educate themselves on it and figure it out. There's a lot of noise out there for sure,
right.
But there's a lot of interesting technologies. There's a lot of smart folks allocating real dollars to these technologies and solutions, and I think it is kind of Web 3.0, as they say. It's crossover between technology and
right.
financial markets, and wherever you stand on it, it's kind of happening regardless.
Yeah, I know some countries are actually trying to push to have their total in crypto.
Countries, cities, the incoming New York City mayor saying
right.
he's getting paid in Bitcoin.
Right.
It's seems to be happening.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you, Liam, for coming on the show tonight, and wish you well.
Thank you.
And look forward to hearing more about this a year from now, and seeing whether some of our concerns have been realized, justified, or basically manufactured in a different way.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Liam. That's Liam Griff, and I'm Lou Goldstein, thanking you for watching. So until next week, stay healthy, stay active, and stay focused. I'll see you next week on another edition of Focus On. Have a good night.
Every day, don't say, born to